The question is it all right if we have a teacher, and this question came from India, an acharya, they called them, who we've been seeing, and I think in India, on our path, often they have an acharya in their area, or they're assigned somebody actually, and they're saying, if that teacher answered a question or dealt with an issue in a way that they felt this person, Swamiji, wouldn't have. Now, what they go on to say, which is a little confusing, is it all right to just hold them as a counselor but not a teacher? It's a little bit of a confusing way because I'm not sure what the difference is, honestly. I think the real questions that's being asked that's so meaningful and very real is, what happens when you go to somebody who you feel is a teacher for you, and they answer a question or they deal with you in a way that feels out of tune? It feels away from the path. And then what do we do with that? How can we hold that person? How do we relate to them? And it's actually, there's several answers to this, but it's very subtle because of, it's just, my thoughts just created a traffic jam, and I'll tell you why. Number one, because it's very hard to know. That question of whose ego is being predominant. Is it possible for our teachers to be coming from a place of ego and not be able to transcend it in the end? Of course it is. And in a minute, I'll tell a story on myself. That's always true because we're not free until we're free. And most of the people that we are looking to for answers for our deepest spiritual questions are not yet totally free. And we know that. Swamiji speaks right out loud about it in a couple of his way earlier talks. But he says, many of your teachers are not necessarily free beings, but perhaps they've been on the path some years longer than you. This is what he says. If I were there, I would have had questions for him about this. But what he said in this talk is if somebody's been on the path longer than you, it behooves you to listen when they speak with you. Now, I'm taking that out of the middle of a long talk, which I've never been able to find again, but I remember it clearly. And I would say for sure, not everybody who's been on this path longer than me is somebody that I could specifically go to and ask a whole lot of questions of. I just am honest about that. Or I would ask them and listen, but I would listen with discernment. Maybe that's a better way to say it. But it's so hard to tell. Is this person not answering the question the way Swamiji would? Because you don't know how Swamiji would answer the question. Or is there truth in that? Is the person out of tune, either in general or for that moment? And this can happen to anybody and everybody. I remember some years ago during a sadhaka training, somebody asked this question. I was trying to remember the other day who it was. If I ask a question of one of the spiritual directors, and I think the answer is coming from ego, what do I do? Good question, really, because we carry this title, spiritual director. Are we free of ego? Of course not. I mean, it's just impossible. We literally wouldn't be in our bodies if that were the case. Plus, some of us have more ego than others. So it's just, you have to reckon with it. We are human beings. And I said to them, the first thing I would do is find somebody else who I trusted as a spiritual teacher, and I would ask the same question. It's fine to get a second opinion everywhere in life, but it's fine to do it spiritually, because soon we can sort out. It's like when people go to doctors for second opinions. This happens all the time. Then they find a third doctor for a third opinion, then a fourth doctor. And some people will go as long as they need to go until the doctor tells them what they want to hear. It happens always. So it's the same thing here. Our ego wants to hear something. And so it's complicated, but I would say always, if it feels that wrong, get a second opinion. I don't see how we can go to somebody for counsel once we're not trusting them. We either have to resolve that or find another counselor/teacher, because we can't be open to truth if we're constantly judging or trying to judge. Where's that person coming from? Is this about them? Is this about me? What's happening? I tell you, I had an experience recently where I was sitting with a friend who was asking me a lot of questions. We were going through many situations. We were together for almost 3 hours. And it was complicated. It wasn't about any one topic or any one thing, but each thing was complicated. And it wasn't until the next day that I realized that my own deep feeling, not intuition, not inspiration, not one of those moments where I would say to somebody, this came to me. If something comes to me, it's different for me than when I'm figuring it out with my mind. I mean, my mind's just my mind. It's been around. It has 77 3/4 years of experience. It's been on a spiritual path a long time, probably many lives, but it's still my mind. But when inspiration comes and you know it, that's different. I share that. Not that I push it on anybody, but I will say to people, this came to me in meditation. But I realized without a doubt, and this was painful for me, very painful, actually, until I realized that it was only my ego that was allowing me to feel pain. It's really quite the trickster here. That some of what I had done with that person was more motivated by some of my own feeling about the topics than by wisdom. And even if some of what was coming to me as a feeling was an accurate caution or this or that, it wasn't about them. It was about me. And that was honestly one of the hardest experiences that I've been through in some years now. I mean, I'm in the process of writing a note, a letter, to own what happened and to free that person as much as I can. This is part of the responsibility of sharing deeply with each other. But it happens. It happens. We were just somewhere. Oh, maybe it was Sunday service last week. I can't even remember. But maybe it was Keshava who said that Master said, and I'm sure this was from the second coming of Christ, that Judas's main flaw was not, or main sin, might have called it a sin, that he betrayed Jesus. I mean, imagine, that's a pretty big sin. But Master said that wasn't the worst thing. The worst failure of his was in not knowing that Jesus would forgive him, that he was a child of God, that he was perfect. We make mistakes. Now, if that was a humdinger of a mistake, granted, but he killed himself over it. He committed suicide. And Master said that was the worst thing for his soul that he did, was lack of faith in God, both in Jesus, through Jesus, and in his own divine self. So I said jokingly before, next instance where ego jumps in, oh my God, I'm terrible. Look what I did. I created more chaos for this person. Fortunately, I knew the person wasn't buying it, and that was relieving to me. But it was still confusing, and I was not able to be there in that instance as a good counselor for them, as a good spiritual guide. It happens. It just has to happen as long as we're human beings. So I always think, here's another part to this question that just popped into my head. No true spiritual teacher, I don't mean true avatar, of course not an avatar, of course not Swamiji or great saints everywhere, but anybody who is true to that part of themselves that is, even in the moment, being a genuine spiritual teacher, would ever mind if you question them. They just wouldn't. Now, if you're there to prove them wrong all the time, they're going to say to you, come back when you're ready. But if you have a question and you ask it from the place of inquiry and not, I'm going to get you, I can't think of any of the great teachers that I know anywhere, but certainly throughout Ananda, who wouldn't welcome that. I mean, and I could say I know it to be true about Jyotish. I know it to be true. I've watched so many people question him, but I know it to be true about many people who often find themselves in a position of teaching and counseling who are not Jyotish or Swamiji, but who feel like, fair enough, absolutely question if you don't understand. Swamiji said all the time he didn't want people just accepting everything he said. He wants us to feel it as truth in our spine. So whatever, and why do we call, what part of yoga or self-realization is the science that is that experiment that can be repeated over and over. And if it's done properly, Master said, his words always come out with the same result. That's a true science. 2 molecules of hydrogen, 1 of oxygen. They're always going to be water or steam or ice. Doesn't matter what you do. H2O is that. And you can blow it apart and bring it back together. There's so many ways you can play with it. But it's science. And so is self-realization. So is truth. These are scientific, there's an art to it, of course, but it's a science. So why would we ever not want to question it? But I think to hold on to doubt and mistrust without moving forward with it and feeling that you have to keep coming back to that person, that's really not good for us. So I feel absolutely, both for your soul, and it's almost a subtle test of who is this teacher? You know, how willing are they to be with you and go deeper and deeper and deeper into your truth, because each soul is different, and you know, this is one of the things about Q&As. We just did an online program with India, with their whole online Kriya. All of the Kriyas, bonds all over India, come together once a week for satsang on Tuesday evenings. And every couple of months, I get invited, which I feel is such a privilege and a joy, to lead that satsang. And a big part of it is Q&A. And the questions are so great, but I often have to say, if I could be with you individually, I would be asking you more questions, because there's always something specific, because everybody has their own unique astral spine. So the answers are always a little different. But as I said earlier, the principles don't vary. They're the same. So I don't know if that person's watching, but I hope that answers that question.